My beloved child. Listen carefully. This is not a normal message, and this is not arriving by accident. There is a reason you stopped here instead of scrolling away, because what is coming next is tied directly to a moment you never prepared for. A moment when someone stood very close to the end of their path and finally understood something they should have realized much earlier. They knew your problem. Not part of it. Not the surface. They knew the full weight of what you were carrying in silence. They saw the cracks behind your strength. They felt the pressure you never explained to anyone. And in their final moment of clarity, one truth hit them harder than anything else. You were never weak. You were never wrong for struggling. You were enduring something that would have broken most people long ago. This realization did not come softly. It came like a wave that leaves no room to escape. And that is why this message feels heavy from the very first second. There is something unsettling about the last moments of understanding. When time is almost gone, the mind stops lying to itself. All the excuses disappear. All the delays lose meaning. That is when they finally connected the dots. They remembered every time you went quiet. Every time you chose distance instead of explanation. Every time you smiled while something inside you was slowly collapsing. They replayed conversations where you hinted at your pain but never said it out loud. They realized you were not asking for attention. You were asking for relief. And they missed it. This is where the shock lives. Not in drama. Not in noise. But in the silence of regret that arrived too late. Because in that final awareness, they understood that your problem was never just a phase. It was a weight you carried alone while the world kept moving like nothing was wrong. What makes this moment impossible to ignore is what followed that realization. Instead of fear, something deeper surfaced. A quiet confession they never spoke. They understood that you were changing, not because you wanted to, but because you had to. Pressure does that. Unseen pressure reshapes people from the inside. They saw that your patience was not endless. They felt the distance growing, and they finally understood why. It was not coldness. It was protection. You were protecting what little strength you had left. And here is the part that almost no one expects. In that final moment, they knew that if things had continued the same way, they would have lost you completely. Not physically. But emotionally. Permanently. That truth landed with a weight that could not be undone. There is a reason this feels personal. Because it is. This is not about blame. This is about recognition that arrived too late to change the past, but not too late to leave an impact. They realized that your silence was not emptiness. It was exhaustion. They saw that your struggle was not confusion. It was clarity that no one listened to. And the most shocking part is this. They understood that your problem was shaping your future decisions right now, even as you listen to this. Choices you are about to make. Lines you are about to draw. Doors you are about to close without explanation. This awareness did not come with panic. It came with acceptance. Because some lessons only arrive when there is no more time to fix things the easy way. So stay here. Do not rush past this moment. Because this is only the beginning of what was understood at the very end. This goodbye was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was heavy with things left unsaid and truths finally seen. And the next part will reveal what they wanted you to know, but could not say out loud when it still mattered. This is not about loss. This is about a realization that changes how you see your own struggle from this point forward. There was a moment when everything slowed down, as if time itself wanted them to understand what they had ignored for so long. In that stillness, your struggle stopped being a distant idea and became something painfully clear. They saw how every delay, every unanswered question, and every half-hearted response had added weight to your days. What shocked them was not how serious your problem was, but how long you had been carrying it without asking anyone to save you. They realized you were not waiting for rescue. You were waiting for someone to notice before it was too late. That awareness arrived with a sharp clarity. You were surviving, not because it was easy, but because you had no other option left. Another truth surfaced, one that changes the meaning of everything that came before. They finally understood that your problem was not created overnight. It was built slowly through moments when you chose understanding over confrontation, patience over expression, and silence over explanation. Each choice made sense at the time. Each choice protected someone else's comfort while quietly draining your own. In their final awareness, they saw how unfair that balance had become. You were giving more strength than you were receiving. You were holding together situations that were never meant to rest entirely on your shoulders. That realization carried a quiet shock, because it revealed something undeniable. You were never asking for too much. You were enduring too much. As the weight of that understanding settled in, they recognized something else that cannot be ignored. Your problem was shaping you into someone stronger, but also someone more distant. You learned how to survive without reassurance. You learned how to function without support. And while that strength impressed others from the outside, it came at a cost that few noticed. They realized that every time you said you were fine, a small part of you stepped further away from the version of yourself that still believed people would show up without being asked. This was not bitterness. This was adaptation. And once someone adapts for too long, returning to vulnerability becomes harder than anyone imagines. What made this realization unbearable was the understanding that you were already preparing to move forward alone. They sensed it. The quiet shift in your energy. The way you stopped explaining yourself. The way you started choosing peace over being understood. In that final moment of clarity, they knew that your problem had taught you a lesson that could not be reversed. You no longer wait for recognition. You no longer expect timely support. You act when you must, and you detach when necessary. This was not a threat. It was a transformation. And it was already happening, whether anyone approved of it or not. This is why this message carries weight. Because the understanding that arrived at the end was not meant to pull you backward. It was meant to confirm what you already feel deep inside. Your struggle was real. Your silence was meaningful. And your strength came from necessity, not comfort. The next part will uncover what this realization means for the path ahead, and why this goodbye was not an ending, but a turning point that reshapes how you carry your life from here onward. There was one final layer of understanding that arrived after everything else had already been accepted. It was the realization that your problem was never meant to be solved by outside voices. They finally saw that advice, opinions, and reassurance could never reach the core of what you were facing. Your struggle was internal, personal, and deeply connected to who you were becoming. In that moment, they understood why you stopped explaining yourself. Words could not carry the weight of what you were learning. You were outgrowing the need to be validated. And that truth, once seen, could not be unseen. They also understood something that might surprise you. Your pain was never invisible. It was simply inconvenient for people who were not ready to face it. In their final clarity, they saw how often your signals were noticed but ignored. Not because they did not care at all, but because acknowledging your problem would have required change. Change in behavior. Change in priorities. Change in effort. And that is where most people hesitate. This realization did not come with anger. It came with calm acceptance. Because you had already adjusted your expectations long before anyone else adjusted their awareness. As everything came together, they realized that your problem was shaping a new kind of strength. Not loud strength. Not performative strength. But quiet control. The ability to remain composed when things fall apart. The ability to walk away without needing closure. The ability to continue forward even when answers never arrive. They understood that once someone develops this kind of resilience, they do not return to who they were before. They become more selective. More intentional. Less willing to chase understanding from places that have already proven unreliable. What made this realization final was the awareness that you were no longer standing at the beginning of your journey. You were standing at a threshold. Behind you was a version of yourself that waited, hoped, and endured silently. Ahead of you was someone who acts decisively and protects their inner world without apology. They understood that your problem was the catalyst, not the curse. It forced growth that comfort never could. And while the process was painful, the result was undeniable. You were no longer fragile. You were precise. This is why this moment matters. Because the goodbye was not about separation. It was about acknowledgement. A recognition that you had already crossed a line internally. The next part will reveal what this transformation demands from you now, and why the understanding that arrived too late for them arrived exactly on time for you. There was a quiet consequence to everything they finally understood, and it carried more weight than any apology ever could. They realized that your problem did not just hurt you in the moment. It trained you. It taught you how to live without leaning. How to make decisions without waiting for agreement. How to accept that clarity sometimes comes alone. This realization was heavy because it revealed something permanent. Once a person learns how to stand unsupported for too long, they stop expecting the ground to be soft. They walk carefully, deliberately, and without illusion. And they knew you had already reached that point. Another truth surfaced that cannot be softened. Your absence would not be dramatic. It would be quiet and irreversible. They understood that when you finally step away, there will be no arguments, no long explanations, and no need for validation. You will simply move forward with a calm that confuses those who underestimated your patience. This was the moment they recognized that your problem had refined your boundaries. You learned where to stop giving, where to stop waiting, where to stop hoping for things to be different. That lesson does not fade. It settles into the way you live. What struck them most was the timing of it all. They realized that your strength had reached a stage where recognition no longer changes your direction. Appreciation feels late. Understanding feels delayed. Because you are no longer motivated by being seen. You are motivated by peace. And peace does not negotiate with confusion. This is the kind of growth that happens quietly and leaves no room for reversal. Once you choose yourself without guilt, you do not return to who you were before that choice. They also understood that your problem had sharpened your awareness. You now see patterns before they repeat. You sense distance before it becomes absence. You recognize effort before it disappears. This awareness is not cynical. It is protective. It keeps you from overextending your heart where it will not be held with care. And in that final moment, they knew something that stayed with them. You were not becoming colder. You were becoming clearer. This is why this goodbye carries such weight. Because it marks the point where understanding arrived, but dependence ended. The next part will reveal what this clarity asks of you now, and why the strength you built in silence is about to redefine how you move through everything that comes next. There was one final understanding that settled quietly, without drama, but with absolute certainty. They realized that your problem was never meant to trap you. It was meant to prepare you. Every sleepless thought, every unanswered question, every moment you felt unseen was shaping a version of you that could no longer be controlled by uncertainty. In that last awareness, they understood that you were no longer reacting to life. You were choosing how to move through it. And that shift changes everything, even if no one else notices it yet. They saw that your silence was no longer pain asking to be heard. It had become strength choosing when to speak. You no longer explain yourself to be understood. You explain only when it matters. This was the most surprising realization of all. You had learned how to protect your energy without closing your heart. You had learned how to care without losing yourself. And once a person reaches that balance, they do not return to chaos out of habit. They move with intention, even when the path ahead feels uncertain. What made this moment final was the clarity about what you would never tolerate again. Half-effort. Delayed respect. Emotional confusion disguised as connection. Your problem taught you to recognize these signs early, before they cost you more than they should. This awareness is quiet but powerful. It does not announce itself. It simply guides your choices. And from this point forward, your life begins to reflect that inner clarity in ways others will feel before they understand. They understood that this goodbye was not about losing access to you. It was about losing the version of you that stayed despite the wait. The version that waited. The version that hoped longer than necessary. That version has already stepped aside. In its place stands someone who knows their limits and honors them without apology. This realization came too late for them, but it arrived exactly when you were ready to move forward without looking back. So remember this as you continue. Your problem did not weaken you. It refined you. It taught you discernment, patience, and the courage to choose peace over familiarity. This is not the end of your story. It is the moment your direction becomes clear. And from here on, every step you take will be guided not by what you endured, but by what you finally understood. There was a final silence that carried more meaning than any conversation ever could. In that stillness, they understood that your problem had already completed its work inside you. You were no longer seeking answers from people who could not meet you at your depth. You were no longer waiting for timing to be perfect. You had learned that clarity does not announce itself loudly. It settles quietly and stays. This realization came with a strange calm. Because once clarity arrives, confusion loses its power over you. They saw that your strength was no longer reactive. You were not surviving moment by moment anymore. You were grounded. Your decisions were slower, steadier, and intentional. You no longer rushed to fix what was not yours to fix. You no longer carried responsibilities that were never meant to be placed on you. This was not emotional distance. This was emotional maturity. And they understood that this version of you could not be pulled back into old patterns, no matter how familiar they once felt. What made this understanding permanent was the shift in how you see yourself. You no longer measure your worth by how much you endure. You no longer prove loyalty through self-sacrifice. Your problem taught you that real strength is knowing when to stop giving without resentment. This lesson reshaped the way you value your time, your energy, and your presence. From this point forward, you do not stay where you are tolerated. You move where you are respected, even if that path feels quieter. They realized that your future would not be loud or dramatic, but it would be solid. Built on choices made with awareness instead of fear. You would not explain your growth. You would simply live it. And those who notice will feel the difference immediately. Your calm will unsettle people who benefited from your silence. Your boundaries will surprise those who expected unlimited access. This is not cruelty. This is evolution. This is why this moment matters more than it appears. Because the goodbye was never about separation alone. It was about confirmation. Confirmation that you have already stepped into a new phase of your life. And the next part will reveal what this new phase demands from you, and why everything ahead will feel lighter, even when it challenges you in ways you never expected. There was a quiet expectation that formed after everything else had settled. Not from the outside, but from within you. They understood that your problem had finally taught you how to trust your own judgment without hesitation. You no longer second-guess your instincts. You no longer look back for permission. This inner certainty is subtle, but it is powerful. It changes how you enter situations and how you leave them. And once this kind of self-trust is built, it does not fade under pressure. They realized that your presence would feel different from now on. Not louder. Not colder. But grounded. You will listen more than you speak. You will observe before you act. And when you choose to move, it will be with clarity that leaves no room for confusion. Your problem refined your awareness so deeply that you now sense truth without needing proof. This is not suspicion. This is alignment. And alignment naturally creates distance from what no longer fits. What made this realization complete was the understanding that you are no longer driven by urgency. You do not rush to fill silence. You do not fear being misunderstood. You allow things to reveal themselves in their own time. This patience is not passive. It is controlled. It comes from knowing that what is meant to stay will not require constant effort to hold together. And what is meant to leave will do so without needing to be chased. They also understood that your future connections will feel calmer, cleaner, and more balanced. You will recognize mutual effort without analyzing it. You will feel respect without demanding it. And when something begins to drain you, you will step back without guilt. Your problem trained you to protect your inner stability as something valuable. Something not everyone gets access to. And that discernment will guide you better than any advice ever could. This is the final shift. The point where your past no longer defines your decisions, but it informs your wisdom. The goodbye was not a loss. It was a release. And from this moment forward, you walk with a quiet confidence that does not need to be announced. Because the strongest transformations are the ones that happen silently,